Obama is back in the news. Yes, believe it or not. There are two issues we need to discuss in reference to Obama. Recently, he had an interview on CNN. Part of that was about Joe Biden and the Ukraine war. We're going to talk about that piece of it tonight. And then also, Russell Brand actually revealed something about Barack Obama. And I know some of you are like, what is it this time? Or is it something that you don't already know? But it's in reference to taxes. And I think you guys need to see the hypocrisy in reference to how someone may have governed versus what they did when they got out of office. This is Russell Brand exposing Barack Obama. We're going to play a little bit of this, and then I'm going to go to the CNN interview.
And fun show. Barack Obama was seen as a great hope for many people, someone that could genuinely change the political conversation, that was a brilliant speaker and a charismatic man. Of course, the 2008 bank bailout smeared that reputation somewhat, as did the droning of Syrian children. But now that he's not president, now that he's an elder statesman advocating for Joe Biden, that guy, let me know in the comments what you think of him. It's disappointing, isn't it, to learn that a legal tax evading strategy that he railed against while president is being exploited now, probably because he's actually so poor and he's, oh no, he's a multimillionaire, isn't he? Let's have a look at this.
As Americans, we don't mind paying our fair share of taxes as long as everybody else does too.
Do we? Yeah, we do.
But for far too long, lobbyists have rigged the tax code with loopholes that let some corporations pay nothing.
Hey guys, he won't be saying that in a couple of years when he's not president. And indeed, he's not saying that in a couple of years.
They've riddled it with giveaways that the super rich don't need, while denying a break to middle-class families who do.
Joe Biden there just thinking, soon it'll be my turn, and possibly earning a few quid on the side. Who's to say what happened when he was vice president? Let me know in the comments.
Let's close loopholes so we stop rewarding
Joe Biden, no, not the loopholes, you idiot. Hunter!
companies that keep profits abroad and reward those that invest here in America.
Everyone knows what to say, don't they? Everyone knows the things that you're supposed to say, but no one actually does them. Yes, let's all clap this. We're not really shutting those loopholes though, are we? Of course we're not. He's not going to be president in a couple of years. He'll be using those loopholes. Oh, phew.
Let's use those savings to rebuild our infrastructure and to make it more attractive for companies to bring jobs home.
Yeah, this is all such great stuff. It's not just bullshit though, is it?
Let's simplify the system and let a small business owner file based on her actual bank statement.
Oh, her. Oh, this is good. You're not going to in a few years just be exploiting those loopholes. Not after you said her. Some of these weathered guys. Come on. I saw Reagan say that. I saw Nixon say that. I saw Jimmy Carter say that. Nobody actually does it.
We can use that money to help more families pay for childcare and send their kids to college. We need a tax code that truly helps working Americans trying to get a leg up in the new economy.
I mean, everything's saying that's all sort of fantastic, but it might as well be theatre. When you look at it, actually, it is there, isn't it? People standing up and clapping, the flag hanging up there, career politicians just sat around, everyone saying the stuff that they know they're supposed to say, everyone knowing that they're not going to actually do anything about it. It's become more and more meta, because in that one, Barack Obama was actually defining the situation. I mean, you know, I'm sick and tired of, like, presidents saying this stuff, and then when they retire from office, going on to exploit those loopholes and give speeches where they earn millions of dollars. Because of the way the world is now, someone could see it all happen in real time. I was thinking that the reason we've got this mad old Joe Biden version of the president now is that no one can be bothered to even emotionally invest in, oh, there's a woman one, oh, there's one that's a different colour, oh, there's like, it's like, just give us an old white one that's totally full of shit and just bring out another one in 4 years.
And we can achieve that together.
To be clap yet, or already? We're still not shutting the loopholes up. No.
Helping hardworking families make ends meet.
That's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. Us, Raytheon, Wall Street, Lockheed Martin, quantitative easing bill, all of it. Just the old hard work. What do you want me to say again? Is it hard?
And I just want to add too, you have to keep in mind, Obama is saying what he's been told is okay to say. So of course he got the okay to make that statement. But once he was out of office, he was able to benefit from those same loopholes that he pretended to champion against in that speech right there. It's all theater. None of these people are real. I don't think they even believe half the things that they say. I think Joe Obama. I almost said Joe Obama. I think Obama was a perfect puppet. someone that you could just pick up and continue to pull the strings, at least for that time being that he was in office, and he was the type of person that was going to follow through. And that's really what they want in DC. They want someone who's status quo, someone that they can pull their strings when need be and will just go along to get along. They don't want someone who's going to, clap back. They don't want someone who's going to talk about being anti-war. They don't want someone that's going to talk about, okay, we need to try to give everybody healthcare. They don't want that. They want someone who's going to be a good little puppet and is going to do what they are told.
Working face. Why don't you just sing a song?
Giving them the tools they need for good-paying jobs in this new economy. Maintaining the conditions of growth.
Oh, shut up. I can't listen to any more of this. Okay, this is from Lee Fang's Substack. Barack Obama campaigned extensively during his presidency to eliminate the carried interest loophole, a tax strategy that allows billionaire investors to evade ordinary income taxes. Yeah, he was just giving a brilliant speech about it. American families, hard-working, common decency. You heard it all before. Hedge funds and other private fund managers use this tax treatment to pay long-term capital gains of 20%, a rate that is almost half of what many working Americans pay.
But why is this allowed in the first place? The reason why this is allowed is because those same people who benefit from those loopholes are the people who are basically pulling the puppet strings, the billionaire class. These billionaires that they own so much. I told you before multiple times about BlackRock and about Larry Fink, how they don't really want to be known. They kind of like to hide in the shadows, but more has come out about them recently. But the people who, the banks, like when we talk about the central banking system, when we talk about like the billionaires, like I'm not talking about millionaires. We're talking about the trillionaires, the people who benefit from that system. If you're the one that controls the money and the way the money moves, then of course you're going to have some type of a policy or some type of a loophole that is going to be beneficial to you moving your money. That's how it works.
Obama, while in office, said this loophole leads to folks who are doing very well paying lower rates than their secretaries. However, since leaving the presidency, Obama has employed a similar tax strategy to potentially only pay capital gains tax for the services he's provided to private business interests. One example of this is Obama's strategic partnership with NBA Africa, which was announced in 2021 as part of an expansion of Africa's largest men's basketball league. The deal is structured as a profit interest share. Now, what this is ordinary business practice. What this exposes is that the rhetoric while in office is absolutely empty and hollow. It's not particularly egregious that Barack Obama is doing this. It's standard, it's normal, everybody does it. What's egregious is that in office they say that and out of office they do this, because everything that takes place in office is a kind of spectacle. It's theater. It's just something that people are saying. If you were able,
it's an episode. It's just a show. It's an episode of a reality show where there's still a script. You just don't think there is because you've been told it's a reality show. It's not really real. It's what they choose to show you. So yeah, it's not that Barack Obama was doing something that was illegal. It's the fact that he's doing something that he actually spoke against while he was in office. That's the exposure there. That's why he's being exposed, because like, how could you stand up and make that speech and then you're doing the same thing that the billionaire class was doing while you were in office, which you complained about and said, we need to stop. And of course you saw the picture. You saw the video there of Elizabeth Warren standing up and applauding it. Of course she would, right? All these people are fake. Even the ones who had any real gusto and real, fight in them, once they got in bed with that DC system, all that went away. That's why they only would let someone like Bernie Sanders even get so far, because they knew.
We've said to young Barack Obama, look, are you sure about this? Because when you leave, you're going to be like a businessman. And you're going to actually need this stuff. You're like, well, I don't think I need to worry because this stuff will never actually happen. So what you are left with is the incontrovertible conclusion that politics is a media spectacle. It's not actually going to do anything. And that is the main message we're trying to transmit to you. That is not the way to improve your life. Participate in it by voting on it, talk about it, preferring one of them over another one, hoping that this one will do better than that one. Look, you can see behind that one talking then is the one that you've got now. He'll be doing his version of this. He's so bloody old, he's not really going to have time to cash in, is he, afterwards? But maybe his kids will. Now, we have to fund ourselves not using profitable tax loopholes because we just can't afford the accountants. So we have decided to accept this commercial from these partners.
All right, we're going to stop it there. And then I'm going to go to the next video, which is the interview. All those people just sitting there and clapping, like all these people are paid. Like even when they retire, like these people get speaking fees, like for the rest of their life, they continue to get paid. They get a pension. You know, they have health care that a lot of you will never get the opportunity to have. These are the people you really need to be, you know, when people say like you need to be nice to politicians, I say bullshit. Why are you being nice to someone who hasn't done anything for you? Be like Janet Jackson and say, what have you done for me lately? Think about that. Now, so that's one piece. The other piece is Barack Obama's interview here on CNN. I do want to tap into this a little bit because he does get into Joe Biden's presidency, and he also gets into the war in Ukraine. And I think we need to see this piece. I think there are different clips of this on YouTube, but I think Obama is lying his ass off in this interview. And I will also say, notice how tired he looks. Notice how worn down he looks. Like, look at his face. I don't know if they just put extra makeup on him or what, but he looks like he's been through it. Let's go on.
Running for re-election.
Yes.
Everybody's talking about his age. People are talking about his polls. Even there's some challenges within the Democrats. Maybe somebody might start to try to primary him, etc. But what I would like to know is, many say that his policies and his legislatives and his wins, frankly, should speak for themselves. And yet, according to the Way to Win, it's a Democrat-leaning firm, only some 22% of Latino voters, 33% of Black voters can actually identify something that they say he's done to specifically make their lives better. Right. What would you say to that? And how would you advise him to connect in a re-election?
Let's just pause here for a second because I want to show you what she just did, right? Notice how she lumped Black voters and Latino voters together. Notice how she did that, right? That's on purpose because now you're addressing the immigration issue, which is one of the issues that has been a big concern under President, Trump, and also under President Biden right now. With the immigration issue is still a problem. They haven't figured out. I won't say they haven't figured out. They have not resolved it. Period. So that's to include the immigration issue, and then also, of course, to mention Black Americans. Barack Obama is half Black. Of course, you're going to mention that as well. And also there have been, and I'll have to look for the numbers to pull up, show you next time. There have been a number of Black men that have been leaving the Democratic Party and joining the Republican Party. And I think we're going to continue to see that trend happen because, again, material needs are not being met by the Democratic Party. But she did the same thing I was telling you about earlier, the people of color thing, right? Okay, listen to this.
How would you advise him to connect in a re-election?
I think Joe Biden has done an extraordinary job leading the country through some very difficult times. I do not think that there's going to be any kind of serious primary challenge to Joe Biden.
Let's just pause right there. He thinks that Joe Biden has done an extraordinary job, but he's not going to give you examples. They're all doing this. They're all doing, at least Ro Khanna will even try to say, oh, well, don't forget about that American Rescue Plan. And he at least tries to mention something. People like Obama are just like, oh, I think he's done an extraordinary job. Doing what? Doing what? Extraordinary job? Okay. Here he goes, just to lie his ass off.
Not think that there's going to be any kind of serious primary challenge to Joe Biden. I think the Democratic Party is unified.
Pause. No significant primary challenge to Joe Biden. RFK Jr. is polling at like 20%. Marianne Williamson, last I checked, was polling like 7 or 8%, somewhere in between there. So together, they're almost at 30%. You don't think that's significant? Obama doesn't think that's significant to an incumbent president? That's significant. Donald Trump had primary challengers. They weren't polling at 20%. So here we go. This is him running cover again for the Democrat establishment.
There was a lot of talk. You'll remember when he was first elected, because Bernie Sanders had run, that somehow there was this huge split between progressive Democrats and more centrist Democrats. And the truth is that partly because of how Joe is governed, those divisions have been bridged.
That's a damn lie. Let's talk about this for a second. Because the Bernie Sanders run, he was like, oh, there's been some type of division between the progressive set and the centrists. But because of Joe Biden, that division has been bridged. Who is he talking about? Is he talking about the politicians in DC, or is he talking about the American people? Let's be clear about this. If he's talking about the politicians in DC, he's basically telling you that Bernie Sanders and the rest of the squad, no, there's no progressivism there anymore. They've moved over to the centrist side, which is what we've been trying to warn you guys about. Now you're hearing that from Obama. But if he's not talking about the politicians in DC and he's talking about the American people, he's 100% wrong. I didn't move over to that side. I know a lot of you did not move over to that side. Like, oh, well, this is just the way it is. Let's just accept it and support Joe Biden. I know plenty of people that came from that Bernie movement that are not okay with the way things are going. So who is he talking about? And if he's talking about the politicians, why isn't he talking about the American people? Has Obama talked to working class people? Has he come into these neighborhoods and talked to the people who are working 2 jobs and asked them how they feel? Ask them how they feel about not having health care? No. Obama is talking to people like him, just as he usually would. He came to Dorchester one time and people I remember it was a big deal that people were like, nah, F him. The only reason he want to show up now was because he's trying to get reelected. Dorchester's a neighborhood in Boston. I should mention that for those who don't know. But the thing is, who's he talking to? See what I mean? He's talking to the college grad, PMC class like himself. He's not talking to the guy that works at Starbucks. He's not talking to the person pumping gas. He's not talking to the pizza delivery guy. You see what I mean? So this shows you what I told you a long time ago. People take their cue from Bernie Sanders and the squad. So if Bernie Sanders and the squad move to the right, then those people, a lot of their followers will say, okay, I guess we're supposed to move kind of to that way as well. But what has happened is it has not gone the way that they thought that it would go. When Bernie Sanders told everybody to vote for Hillary Clinton when he lost in 2016, he was booed, but some people were like, okay, we're going to do it. Then when Bernie Sanders did it again in 2020, he was booed again. Some people were like, okay, we're going to go ahead and do it. But since then, the way that they have voted on legislation and Bernie Sanders coming out of the gate early saying he's going to support Joe Biden before there were even any primary challengers, and then Marianne Williamson announcing, and RFK Jr. and Cornel West, and all 3 of them are running on some type of progressive policy. And for Bernie Sanders to support the person that doesn't support Medicare for all, and including the squad, Jamal Bowman says we got to drag him over the finish line. They've exposed themselves. I realized it after Force the Vote. But they have exposed themselves and people really don't want to rock with them like they used to. You still got some stands out there, but they've exposed themselves. So pay attention to what Obama is saying.
I think what's true in American politics generally is until you get to campaigns, people aren't paying much attention. Mm-hmm. People have gone through a difficult time because of COVID and the pandemic and lockdowns, because of inflation, primarily the result of both the war in Ukraine and rising energy prices, as well as supply chain issues. And so
But Joe Biden is doing an extraordinary job. Isn't that what he said at the beginning? Now, he just brought up inflation, supply issues, the war, but he's doing a good job.
So people have memories about eggs got more expensive and gas was more expensive. And they haven't been paying as much attention to the fact that, for example, the African-American unemployment rate is lower than it's been in decades.
So what? Let's talk about these jobs. Just because you create jobs don't mean these jobs are paying a living wage. Just because the unemployment rate for African Americans may be lower, according to Barack Obama, doesn't mean those African Americans are making good money at those jobs. You see the problem? Doesn't mean these are full-time jobs. They never tell you what these jobs are. Full-time jobs? Are they part-time jobs? Are they contract positions? Are these temp positions? A lot of the people I know that have been getting new jobs here in the Boston area, those have been contract positions. Those haven't been full-time jobs, and they don't include full-time benefits. So what are the jobs? Just because people working don't mean that they're surviving. Just because people working doesn't mean they're not still struggling. This is where he misses the plot. But he knows this. Obama, Harvard educated, he's very intelligent. He's not stupid. He's a pawn.
The campaign will allow President Biden to make those arguments. And I think that, in a media environment that's so cluttered, it's very hard to break through until you get to election time. You'll recall when I ran for reelection.
Now he's going to blame. Listen to this. Let me tell you what he's really saying here. This part's kind of funny.
In a media environment that's so cluttered.
In a media environment that's so cluttered, you know what that's a signal to, right? He's signaling all the other people out there that do like independent media, like me. He's talking about us. He's done this before, this little dog whistle that he does towards kind of like saying bad things about independent media without saying them explicitly. He's done this before where he feels like we're part of the problem. We shouldn't be here and we're crowding the space. Because think about it. If you remove us, if you take away independent media, the media space isn't as crowded anymore.
It's very hard to break through until you get to election time. You'll recall when I ran for re-election in 2012, my poll numbers weren't that great, and we ended up winning comfortably.
When you were running for re-election in 2012, your polling did not say that 70% of voters did not want you to run for president. Okay.
Part of that was just we started campaigning and we were able to get a message out, and people said, yeah, that policy or this thing left undone, that irritated me a little bit. But overall, I think he's done a good job. And I think that's what they're going to conclude about Joe Biden as well.
I don't think so. Out of touch, totally ill-informed. And he also, I don't think it's a fair comparison to compare his reelection to Joe Biden's reelection. Obama ran against Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney was not the best candidate. Like, I'm just keeping it real. So you ran against someone that you already knew was not a strong candidate. So you had that going for you. Also, of course, you're incumbent. You're going to have that going for you. But that's the big reality. You did not have a strong challenger. Joe Biden has a strong challenger. Donald Trump is ahead of Joe Biden in the polls. And I know it's still early, but still. Because see, before, Biden could critique Trump's record. Now Trump is critiquing Biden's record as president. And a lot of people are angry in this country economically and frustrated. So I don't think it's fair to make the comparison. By 2012, this was after the 2008 housing crisis. Things were starting to pick up again. Obama doesn't mention that as well. We're still dealing with inflation. Think about that, guys.
when Russia started its illegal invasion, the second invasion of Ukraine, I believe you said that democracies, it's a clarion call, it's a wake-up call, democracies are getting flabby and feckless. Where does Ukraine, in your view, stand in the fight to preserve democracy?
I think it's vital. It's interesting, before I left office, I gave speeches not just here in Athens, but also in Hamburg and in London. And one of the arguments I made is, do not take for granted the extraordinary achievement of the European Union and the fact that a continent that was racked by war and bloodshed for centuries was now as prosperous and as peaceful as any in history. And then now we've seen the first war on European soil in recent memory, and I think it was a wake-up call to Europe, and I think it was a wake-up call to the West and to democracies around the world, that the old ways of thinking, might makes right, big countries can do what they want to small countries, that people cannot independently determine their futures.
But how can Obama criticize big countries doing something to small countries when the United States government has been doing that for decades? Over a century, actually. You mean like the way you approve drone strikes in Libya, Obama? Wasn't that a big country doing something to a small country? Iraq? Somalia? This doesn't make any sense, what he's saying right here.
That those forces have to be confronted. Watching the Ukrainians themselves with such courage and bravery fight back, I think that reminded Europe of who they were. And I've been impressed by the degree to which, in not easy circumstances, Europe has stood up. It has provided the aid that was necessary. I think the Biden administration has very deftly managed maintaining that alliance to support Ukraine. And I believe the stakes are high to send a message to somebody like Putin that they are not going to just be able to willy-nilly determine the borders of other countries.
But it's okay for the U.S. government to do that? See, that's the thing. Like, this is hilarious to me. Some of the same things that he's criticizing Russia for doing, the U.S. government has been doing this. So the problem isn't necessarily that Russia's doing. The problem is that someone besides the United States is doing it, which means the U.S. cannot be the world's police. That's really what that's about. There's so much hypocrisy here.
So obviously hindsight is a great thing, 2020 vision is a great thing, but you experienced while you were in office Putin's first invasion, the annexation of Crimea. And many people said neither you nor the Western allies stood up and put enough red lines around him around that. So what's your reaction to that? And I want to just add also your friend, your good friend and colleague, Angela Merkel, is under very serious criticism right now. I know you've just met with her recently. Should she have leveraged, Germany's economy, its energy on the addiction to cheap energy in Russia? Was that a mistake?
Well, I think the Ukraine of that time is not the Ukraine that we're talking about today. There's a reason why there was not an armed invasion of Crimea, because Crimea was full of a lot of Russian speakers, and there was some sympathy to the view that Russia was representing its interests.
What about the Russian speakers and the people who are ethnically Russian in the Donbass?
Rada at the time, the Ukrainian parliament itself, still had a number of Russian sympathizers, and the politics inside Ukraine were more complicated. And part of what happened was both myself, but also Merkel, who I give enormous credit for, had to pull in a lot of other Europeans kicking and screaming to impose the sanctions that we did and to prevent Putin from continuing through the Donbass into the rest of Ukraine.
Did you hear what he just said there? Listen to the part about the sanctions. Listen to this.
Ukraine were more complicated. And part of what happened was both myself, but also Merkel, who I give enormous credit for, had to pull in a lot of other Europeans kicking and screaming to impose the sanctions that we did and to.
They had to pull in Europeans kicking and screaming. I hope everyone's paying attention to this, to impose the sanctions that they did. These sanctions kill people. Like think about it.
To prevent Putin from continuing through the Donbass into the rest of Ukraine. So I actually think that given both where Ukraine was at the time and where the European mindset was at the time, we held the line. And part of what happened was, over time, a sense of Ukrainian identity separate from Russia and a determination to push back against Russia and an ability to prepare both militarily and civically to resist Russian pressure. They built up those muscles, and that's part of the reason why they were able to respond the way they did when you actually saw.
You're just going to leave out the fact that even congressmen like Ro Khanna, that letter that came from the White House, you're just going to leave out the fact that in 2018, there were already politicians in DC who wrote a letter talking about the concern that they had because of the rise of Nazification in Ukraine and Poland. You're just going to leave that out? That was 2018. It's 2023. Let's put the pieces of the puzzle together, guys. Joe Biden couldn't be in office for 3 years without participating and encouraging another conflict. You're just going to leave out the fact that Russia did try to negotiate in the beginning? You see the lies? Do you see how they're just playing? Obviously, the woman interviewing him, either she doesn't know these things that I just told you, or she does knows and she's been informed not to discuss it. But I have a feeling she doesn't even know what I just told you. So we're just going to leave that out? You're just going to leave out the fact that Russia was not provoked? Is that what we're doing here? When I tell you that Barack Obama is a puppet, he is a puppet. Let me let him finish here, and I'll tell you about the rest of this, because this is a mess.
To resist Russian pressure, they built up those muscles, and that's part of the reason why they were able to respond the way they did when you actually saw what was, in my view at least, incredibly misguided, not to mention illegal and incredibly cruel incursion by Russian forces.
Do you think Putin should have been challenged more then?
I think that we challenged Putin with the tools that we had at the time, given where Ukraine was at the time.
In other words, they didn't have more military funding at that point in time. In other words, what he's trying to tell you, given the tools that they had at that time, that also refers to resources and weapons, and the defense budget was not as high as it is now. Everybody following the dots? These things that we need to pay attention to. Something he said at the very beginning, we're going to go back to, and I'm going to tell you that this is a warning sign. So I called it. This part right here that he mentions about Biden, this piece.
Even there's some challenges within the Democrats. Maybe somebody might start to try to primary him, etc. But what I would like to know is, many say that his policies and his legislatives and his wins, frankly, should speak for themselves. And yet, according to The Way to Win, it's a Democrat-leaning firm, only some 22% of Latino voters, 33% of Black voters can actually identify something that they say he's done to specifically make their lives better. Right. What would you say to that? And how would you advise him to connect in a re-election?
Listen to this piece
I think
here.
Joe Biden has done an extraordinary job leading the country through some very difficult times. I do not think that there's going to be any kind of serious primary challenge to Joe Biden. I think the Democratic Party is unified.
When he says there's not going to be any serious primary challenge, the Democratic Party is unified, what that really means is that, mark my words, in some way, shape, or form, if need be, he will intervene. Mark my words, just like last time. In some way, shape, or form, if he needs to do it, he will intervene. If he has to make a couple calls again to tell people, hey, Bobby Kennedy, drop out, he'll do it. Everybody remember this video, remember this live stream, because he's already letting you know, oh no, I think they're pretty unified, which means everybody got on board, got the message and got the signal to get on board for Joe Biden. Just like he got everybody on message to get on board for Joe Biden when he ran in 2020. And that included Bernie Sanders to drop out as well. And that included Bernie Sanders and all the rest of them. So there you go. So don't be surprised if the rest of them, we don't know who else is going to announce. Don't be surprised if they drop out. Just remember who was behind in the scenes. Terry Hinton says selection, not election. Exactly. Exactly. Thank you, Marcos. Warren tweeted it out. You owe me $1.99. LOL. I think she's running for Senate, right? Kathy said Warren's running for Senate re-election, not president. Okay, sorry. Oh, that's fair. I didn't say that. I didn't specify. Thank you, DC. For the record, libertarianism began as a left-wing anarchist philosophy in 19th century France. Read Joseph Desjacques, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. Thank you, Janice. Unemployment rate only count those eligible for unemployment. That's right. Right. This does not include people who may be an adult, but say you live with your parents, or you live with you live with someone else, but you're an adult and you don't have a job. That doesn't count. You're not counted. Thank you, Darren. Biden has done as much as Obama, nothing. Thank you for this as well. For a smart guy, Barack Obama's grammar is mediocre at best. He talks with a certain rhythm. I also think that's on purpose too, by the way, to get people to stay attentive. And thank you for this as well. I'm on poor nose. She's also an elitist puppet. So there you go.